Alright, hello, citizens of the Nigelverse. It is Nigel here once again, and this is going to be another discussion video. So, last week, as part of Awful Month, I I reviewed slash ranted about the Last Airbender movie. Because the movie was absolutely dreadful, which is kind of a nice way of putting it. It was an absolute abomination of a movie, and it's one that had and I mentioned this in the review, where it's not just a bad movie. It's a bad movie, of course, but it's an even worse adaptation. Pretty much taking every single thing good about the show and just ruining it. And I barely scratched the surface. I'd even talk about how they blew the whole Ozai reveal, where he's supposed to be more mysterious in the show. Over here, he's shown outright and doesn't even look that menacing. I talk about all the other bad stuff going on, the whole lack of chemistry between the characters, and the fact that they didn't even introduce Toph, although she's more so towards Earth, book 2, I should say, which is about Earth, which honestly, I think is a blessing in disguise that she was in this movie, because they would have ruined her too, and then they had the gall to almost try and ruin Azula as well, but thankfully there was no sequel made, so Azula got spared. But yeah, so with all that going on, it was a bad movie and just a dreadful experience all throughout, and that's why I talked about it in the review. But could it be saved? Is there a way that this movie could be salvaged? If someone, for example, me, were to rewrite the movie, redo everything, remake history, go back in time, do a little bit of time traveling to fix this movie, could it be fixed? Could it be salvaged? That's what I want to talk about today. Hey, we're going to answer the question, or try our best to answer the question, could we try and salvage the Last Airbender movie? Could it be saved? Could it potentially work as an adaptation? And right off the bat, my answer to that is probably. Trust me, there was a lot going wrong with the movie. A lot of stuff going bad or poorly with the movie. But could it be saved? Let's talk about it. So, right off the bat, how will we go about trying to potentially fix this movie? For starters, I don't want to completely overhaul the movie, because for the most part it kind of tries half-heartedly, with little to no effort, to try and tell the tale of at least book 1 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, where our characters get to the Northern Water Tribe in order to learn water bending, and then having the battle at the Northern Water Tribe. Okay, we got that. So that, I think, is fine. That, at least that plot point being in the movie. How it's executed will need to be fixed, but that being a part of the plot of the movie, I think is fine, because it sets up for sequel baiting, which they did at the end. So that part, I think, is fine. We'll leave that alone. But now we get to the rest of the movie, because aside from that, the rest of the movie is where things mess up. So right off the bat, have more interaction between the characters. Here's Aang, Katara, and Sokka, or Aang, Katara, and Sokka. The mispronunciation of the names is annoying, but compared to the other stuff going on in the movie, it's almost a non-factor. Keyword almost. It's still pretty bad, but the movie ultimately, I think, has bigger problems than just that. But have more interaction between them. One of the reasons why the show worked, and one of the reasons why the characters were so beloved, is because we saw them interact with each other. And this is something else I didn't mention in the movie when I reviewed it. The character personalities, they're way off here. Aang is very serious, and he's supposed to be the protector. He's the Avatar, obviously, but he's also very childish and playful. One of the reasons why he didn't want the Avatar role, which the show does a fantastic job of representing, kind of like that innocence being stripped away, because Aang is still very young, but because of everything that being the Avatar entails. He's essentially having a lot of that youthful innocence ripped away from him, so he's trying to kind of hold on to that, and that is something that made the show work and made the show worth watching, because as we saw the progression of the character, as Aang became more serious, we saw him grow as a character, while still retaining some of that childish playfulness, but it's also kept in mind that he's still a kid, so a lot of his actions, while we as like I guess older people, maybe teenagers or adults, would be like, probably shouldn't have did that. We have to remember he's a kid, and that has to be kept in mind. Katara, she's very motherly, but she can also be kind of aggressive, which makes sense. She went through a lot. Her mother was killed, her dad's off in the war and everything, and she's seen all the atrocities committed by the Fire Nation. And Sokka, he's the strategist, but also the comic relief. He's witty, he's sarcastic, he's funny, which none of it was in the movie. That Sokka was a boring Sokka. The one character that you should never make boring in any Avatar adaptation, and the other characters, it was suck it, they're boring, but the one character you probably should never make boring, that was like a cardinal rule, you should never make this character boring, is Sokka. But Sokka is witty. He has a lot of one-liners, punchline, and stuff like that. But he's also mature, or he's a bit of a cynic. He's based in reality. He's the strategist. Things like that. And even without bending, he's still relatively competent, whether it's with his boomerang or with his sword. So go based off that. Explore the characters' personalities. And the thing that made the show work as well is the characters' personalities gelled with each other. We saw how the characters interacted. We saw how their personalities played off of one another, because that's storytelling. Having characters with different personalities come together and gel together, and that's what the movie lacked, and that was a major reason to not be invested in this movie, because none of that was there. And taking liberties in movies is something I've kind of talked about on a previous episode of System Shock Radio. I forget which one exactly, but taking liberties, I think, is okay at some points, but sometimes you run the risk of ruining something that made the source material great in the first place, and that's what happened here. With the source material, the way the characters' personalities gelled is what made it work, and the fact that it doesn't work here is because it doesn't really work because the characters aren't what they're supposed to be, and they're dull as a result of it. That and the acting doesn't help either, which we'll get to, but yeah, so fix that hat. Zuko, which to their credit, Zuko they kind of tried to play into that personality where he's headstrong, he's aggressive, but that comes out of being upset because he's resented by his father, pretty much not wanted by his father because Zuko spoke out of turn, and Ozai is a jerk and stuff like that. That dynamic, they tried to explore that in the movie, but they didn't really do it as well as they could have. And then Iroh, when it comes to the movie, they got Iroh half right. Iroh is very respectful. He's like a father figure to Zuko. But he's also fierce. He's tough. He was the Dragon of the West. He was the general in the Fire Nation army before her kind of giving it up after he lost his son in the war. But Iroh still brings that out from time to time in the show, and that's what adds depth to Iroh's character, is that if he wasn't as cool as he is in terms of personality, he would probably single-handedly have destroyed the Avatar. But as we find out in the show, and sorry for the spoilers, Iroh, of course, is protecting the Avatar. But if he wasn't like that, if he was truly committed to winning the war and the Fire Nation and everything, similar to his brother or Ozai, then Iroh could get it done, and Iroh would have no problem stomping the Avatar. But that's not what Iroh is all about. Although not to take anything away from Aang. Obviously, Aang very competent and everything in his own right. Aang essentially pulling off the greatest cram session in history. But I know I'm kind of all over the place, but that's because the show was so fantastic just to see how bad the movie was. But yeah, so those character traits got to be fixed. But the next thing is, of course, the casting. And casting people of the wrong race for the different regions and everything. And of course, the water tribe and everything, both the southern and northern, are supposed to be more based off of Inuit people, and we didn't get that. They were essentially whitewashed. Meanwhile, the Fire Nation is supposed to be more, I believe, either Chinese or Japanese in those regards. And then the Earth Kingdom and Air Nomads, I think, worked fine for the most part. But yeah, so those are the biggest two. But like I said, movie bigger problems, but those really didn't help either. And the fact that the acting wasn't great, maybe hire better actors or give them better direction. I think would have worked better. And it sucks because as ultimately the acting is what has to carry the movie, because the characters have to be on screen and they have to interact on screen. So you want people to act on screen. And we didn't really get that in the movie, and the movie kind of flopped as a result of that, among other things. But that has to be fixed. And the third thing that has to be fixed, and perhaps the most important, is the action in the movie. More specifically, the bending, because the bending, and I mentioned this in the review, having to do like all these like maneuvers and stuff to do bending and stuff like that takes too long, and it gets people out of it. Versus the show, everything felt more natural, which played into how bending was presented in the show. It felt very natural, with things like water being bent and pretty much at will. Same with Earth, them doing all these amazing things, and using his air bending throughout, and the fire bending, how it felt natural, how it came from within, and even the sub bending types like blood bending, or lightning bending, or metal bending, and all that in the show felt fluid, and it felt nice. It was good to look at. It was visually pleasing in that regard, and we didn't get that in the movie. Everything looked cheap. It looked really, really low budget. It did not look great, to say the least, and that, I think, was one of the major reasons why the movie flopped as hard as it did, among other reasons. But yeah, so fix those three things, and I think the movie would have worked a lot better. Would it have been as good as the source material? Probably not, right? But I think it would have worked a lot better than the end result of what we got, and what we got wasn't great. And as I mentioned, if you aren't a fan of the show, if you haven't seen the show, first of all, I recommend checking it out. But if you're not really a fan of the show, if you don't really watch the show, then this is just a bad movie. But if you're a fan of the show, then this movie, this adaptation, feels insulting. And if you fix three things that I talked about, as well as the other stuff that I kind of mentioned a little bit, then I think you'd have a much better movie. But sadly, that's not what we got. But it maybe we'll be getting. Apparently, there is supposed to be, I believe, a live-action version of Avatar coming to Netflix. I don't know if that's still the case, but yeah, so hopefully that does better. But as for this movie, while these things probably could have fixed the movie, sadly, that's not what we got, and instead, we have a forever blemish when it comes to the Avatar fandom. But that is going to do it for this discussion, I think. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please do me a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, turn on post notifications so you know every time I upload a video, so you can see as soon as it drops. Let me know in the comments below, do you agree or disagree with my sentiments here? And if you could also alter the movie to make it better, what would you fix and or change in those regards? And like I said, do you agree or disagree with my points and everything here? But thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.